The same system that once let a human outrun something with teeth now fires for a red dot on an app icon. Not a metaphor. The same hormones, the same racing heart, the same fuel dumped into your blood, all of it triggered by a little badge that says 3. Your body cannot tell the difference. And it turns out there's a very good reason for that. Before we go further, a gentle note. This is general educational information about how the body works, not medical or psychological advice, and not a substitute for a doctor or a qualified professional who knows your particular situation. Think of the next few minutes as a look under the hood at a system you've had your whole life and probably never met. So let's start with the moment itself. Your phone buzzes. Face down on the desk, so you can only see the glow. You turn it over. There's a name and one line of text, cut off halfway. And somewhere in the quarter of a second, before you've actually read the words, before you know whether this is a crisis or a coupon, something in your chest has already tightened. That's the part worth pausing on. You hadn't read it yet. You had no information at all. And your body had already committed. This isn't a modern quirk or a sign that phones have broken you. What you just felt has a name, and it's older than agriculture, older than language, older than more or less everything you'd recognize as human life. In the early 20th century, a Harvard physiologist named Walter Cannon spent years studying what happens to an animal's body when it meets something dangerous. He gave what he found a name that stuck. He called it the fight-or-flight response. It's the body's emergency protocol, and Cannon's insight was that it isn't chaos. It's coordinated, it's fast, it's exquisitely well-designed. Here's roughly what it does. The moment a threat is detected, a small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain called the amygdala sounds an alarm. Think of it as a smoke detector. Not clever, not thoughtful, just extremely quick. It doesn't wait for the rest of your brain to work out what's going on. It goes off first and lets you sort out the details afterward. Within a second or two, a cascade begins. Adrenaline floods your bloodstream. Your heart rate climbs. Your airways open wider to take in more oxygen. Blood is redirected away from things that don't matter in an emergency, like digesting your lunch, and pushed toward the muscles that might need to move. Stored sugar is released into your blood as fuel. Your pupils widen. Your attention narrows to a point. All of that in less time than it takes to read this sentence. Your body has prepared you, comprehensively, to sprint or to fight. And you're sitting in a chair, looking at a message that says, "Hey, quick question." Notice the order of events, because it's the strangest part of the whole story. The alarm doesn't wait for your opinion. The thinking part of your brain, the part that reads the words and works out that this is your colleague asking about a spreadsheet, arrives late. It's slower. It's more careful. It's better in almost every way that matters. And it is comprehensively beaten to the punch every single time. By the time you've understood the message, your body has already responded to it. Now, why doesn't your body simply notice that a text message is not a leopard? It's not as though you're confused about it. Consciously, you know perfectly well there's no danger here. So why does the alarm still sound? Because the alarm was never designed to be right. It was designed to be fast. Consider the arithmetic your ancestors were living with. Imagine a rustle in the grass. Two possible mistakes are available to you. You could assume it's a predator when it's actually the wind, in which case you waste some energy, feel briefly silly, and carry on with your life. Or you could assume it's the wind when it's actually a predator, in which case you don't have a life to carry on with. Those two errors are not equal, not even close. So the system was tuned, over an enormous span of time, to make the cheap mistake often rather than the expensive mistake once. Your smoke detector goes off when you make toast. That isn't a malfunction. That's the entire point of a smoke detector. Your notification is the toast, which brings us to the interesting part, and to a scientist who spent a career on exactly this problem. Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist and primatologist at Stanford, and he wrote a book with one of the great titles in science, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. The question in that title is a serious one, and the answer explains a great deal about your afternoon. A zebra on a plane sees a lion. Its stress response fires magnificently. It runs. And then, one way or another, the episode ends. If the zebra escapes, it stops running. Within minutes, it's grazing again. The alarm switched on, did its job, and switched off. That's the shape the system was built for. Sudden, physical, brief, resolved. Now look at your day. The message arrives. Your body fires. But there's nothing to run from and nothing to fight, so the fuel your body just released has nowhere to go. You answer the message. And before your system has fully wound back down, another one arrives. Then a calendar invite. then a name in a group chat you weren't expecting to see, then a headline, then a red dot on an icon you didn't even open. Sapolsky's central point is that we've taken a system beautifully engineered for short, sharp, physical emergencies, and we activate it with psychological ones, over and over, all day long, for things that will not be resolved by running. The zebra never worries about the lion it might meet next Tuesday. You've probably worried about next Tuesday twice while watching this. So what does that leave us with? A body that is not broken. A body that is, if anything, working too well. Every part of that cascade is doing precisely what it evolved to do. The problem isn't the response. The problem is that a response calibrated for rare, physical, resolvable danger is now being triggered by something that arrives 40 times before lunch and can't be outrun. This is what researchers sometimes call a mismatch. Not a flaw in you, and not a flaw in the design. Just a very old, very good system running in an environment nobody designed it for. And it's worth sitting with the timescales here, because they're absurd. The stress response in your body is not thousands of years old. It's shared, in recognizable form, with animals that have never met a human being. It predates us entirely, whereas the smartphone in your hand is younger than a lot of people watching this. Your body has had less than a single human lifetime to encounter a device that can summon that ancient alarm from a pocket, at any hour, from anyone on Earth. It has not adapted. It was never going to adapt that fast. Nothing does. And now the part where a video like this usually goes wrong. This is not the moment where I tell you to throw your phone in a lake and move to a cabin. That would be silly, and honestly, a little insulting. Your phone is how you work, how you're paid, how you know the people you love are all right. Nobody is giving that up because a video suggested it, and nobody should have to. There's also a whole genre of advice that treats this as a discipline problem, as though the correct response to an ancient neurological alarm is to simply try harder. You cannot willpower your way out of a reflex. You can't decide not to blink when something comes at your eye, and you can't decide not to feel that jolt when your phone lights up. Anyone selling you the idea that you should be able to has misunderstood the machinery. What this is simply an explanation, because it changes something, knowing this. Most people, when they notice this reaction in themselves, treat it as a personal failing. They decide they're anxious, or weak, or bad at boundaries, or somehow uniquely incapable of relaxing in a way that other people manage effortlessly. And that story is not only unpleasant, it's wrong. There's nothing to fix in a smoke detector that correctly detects smoke. You are not failing at modern life. You're running perfectly good software on hardware from a different world. Now, a careful word, because this is worth saying clearly. Everything we've talked about is the normal, healthy, everyday version of a system that everyone has. But if the alarm in you never seems to switch off, if the tight chest and the racing thoughts are constant rather than occasional, if you feel unable to rest even when nothing is happening, or if any of this is genuinely interfering with your sleep, your work, or your relationships, that's worth taking seriously and worth talking through with a doctor or a qualified mental health professional. Not because something is wrong with you, but because that's a real thing that real help exists for, and you shouldn't have to just push through it. Understanding a mechanism is useful. It isn't the same as care, and it isn't meant to replace it. So where does this leave you the next time your phone lights up on the desk? Probably in the same chair, with the same chest tightening, because knowing why a thing happens doesn't switch it off. That's not how bodies work. But something small might be different. Instead of the old story, the one where you're too jumpy or not disciplined enough, you might have a more accurate one. A signal arrived. A system that has kept your ancestors alive through every danger this planet could produce, noticed it and did what it has always done, at a speed you'll never consciously match, on your behalf, without being asked. It's just that this time, it was a calendar invite. There's something almost fond in that, once you see it. This old, loyal, slightly over-enthusiastic thing inside you, still scanning the grass, still ready, still absolutely certain that the rustle might be a leopard, because for a very long time, sometimes, it was. If this gave you a new way to understand that jolt, there's a good chance someone you know needs to hear it too, especially anyone who's decided their reaction to a buzzing phone is a personal weakness. Consider sending it their way. Then come back and tell me, in the comments, what your body reacts to before your brain has caught up. I read every one of these, and I suspect a lot of us have the same list. One last time, gently, because it matters. What we've talked about today is general information about how the body works, not medical or psychological advice, and not tailored to your situation. If the alarm rarely seems to quiet down, or if any of this is affecting your daily life, please talk with your own doctor or a qualified professional who can support you properly. Because in the end, you're not a person who panics at nothing. You're a person carrying a superb, ancient, faithful alarm system through a world that keeps setting it off. And there is a real difference between those two stories, even if your heart rate can't tell.